Their podcast was created by Beth Presswood to focus on feminist issues from a secular perspective and to increase the presence of women's voices in the secular community. It is sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin and feature regular contributions from Jen Peeples, Tracie Harris, and Lene Glasser, who is not here. Topics often include reproductive rights, women's health, religious misogyny, and gay and transgender issues. Today they are joined by Greta Christina for what will be a later podcast. Let's hear it for the Godless Bitches.
Is this on? Okay, I guess it is. Well, I'm Beth Presswood, and we are the Godless Bitches. Thank you. We are associated with the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational group dedicated to positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We're located in Austin, Texas, and Greta Christina is here with us today. We're basically just going to talk about some of the issues with inclusivity in the movement and things that Greta and PZ and Richard Haynes and Tony Penn and everybody have already been talking about today. And then I think we're mostly going to do questions, so have some good ones out there. So, how's everybody today? Everyone loving the convention? We love Atheist Alliance of America. Hello, Denver. All that. Woo! All right, so Greta, wonderful talk today. Really loved it. For everybody that wasn't here at the convention, it was about what the atheist movement, secular movement, can learn from the LGBT movement. So, was there anything in your talk that you didn't get to because we were getting a little short there?
Well, so there's, huge number of things that I think the atheist movement can learn from the history of the LGBT movement, and I covered a lot of it in the talk today, and I could actually gas on about that topic for hours. But there's one particular issue that's been on my mind a lot, especially lately, given all the conflagrations and conflicts that have been going on in the atheist and skeptical communities. And this again, I think this is something that we can really learn from the history of the LGBT movement and also from the history of other social change movements. And it's this: we tend to sort of do a lot of hand-wringing about conflict within our movement. And we go, oh my gosh, there's all these schisms and there's all this fighting and, there's all these divisions and we have all these, debates and, all this controversy and, we're tearing ourselves apart. And a part of me wants to say, that hasn't been true of any other social change movement. It's like, do you think the LGBT movement didn't have, huge drama and huge conflicts, during our history? And, the feminist movement and, the civil rights movement and the labor movement, every social change movement has gone through this and continues to go through it because, what do you know? We're human beings, which means we're primates, which means we have conflict. And especially as a social change movement starts to get in the phase that it is now, which is just really beginning to take off like a rocket and beginning to draw a lot more brand new people who haven't been in the movement for, before. We're going to get a lot of conflict. It's like people have been kind of poking along, doing things the way they've always been doing them for many decades. All of a sudden, there's a whole bunch of new people, and they have new ideas. And also, again, people, primates, drama, conflict. And so, a lot of people have this sort of doom and gloom attitude about the fact that we're having a lot of conflicts, and really, yes, they can be frustrating. Yes, they can be demoralizing. The LGBT movement went through all of this exact stuff, and we've gotten a lot done. So I would like to encourage people to not lose heart over the fact that we're fighting, because that happens, and it doesn't mean that we're not going to get stuff done.
Yeah, I have been pretty sad lately to see, relationships broken up and things, just the drama. But yeah, I think we're going to come out stronger on the other side for it.
I was going to kind of take off on that because you mentioned the feminist movement. And in fact, early on in the feminist movement, there were a group of lesbians who wanted lesbian rights explicitly outlined as part of the platform of some of the major women's rights groups. and they staged a protest. And I think this happened in like 1970 or something like that. It was really early on when the feminist movement in this country was really taking off. And they were nicknamed the Lavender Menace, okay? And they actually took over a conference. And as part of that, they did some consciousness raising, and they explained to the heterosexual women there why it was in their interest to adopt this. And you know what? It worked. By, I think, 1972, that was part of the platform of the National Organization for Women. They went forward with that. And it has not had a single negative impact on that organization. So, you know, all the people that are saying this is going to split the movement, it's going to make us less effective, they have no data on their side. It's not true.
Yeah, I think we can learn a lot from the LGBT movement, as you said, and things like this, they have happened before. This is not a completely new thing. You know, it's just the atheist side of it, and the secular side, separation of church and state, and everything else that goes along with our movement. So, atheism plus. We might as well just bring that thing up. The ACA, we actually have a blog post on our blog at Free Thought Blogs. We've always been atheism plus. And to a certain extent, everybody's atheism plus something. Because if you're going to go all out dictionary atheist, just lack a belief in God, you can't even get to separation of church and state, atheist destigmatization, wanting other people to be atheist. You can't even get there. So those things are just as much, you know, not atheism as feminism and gay rights and everything else.
Yeah, I was going to say, Tracie and I actually were having this conversation over lunch, that if you're just dictionary atheism and that's all, there's nothing else to your atheism, you're actually irrelevant to this conversation. And I don't mean that as a put down. I mean that you can't stop us. We're going to do this anyway. And given the fact that we're doing it anyway, no matter what you say, that is the very definition of irrelevant.
Yeah, and I could talk about this for a long time. I'll try to keep it short. A couple things. First of all, yes, definitely. You know, the atheist movement, to the degree that it is a movement and to the degree that it is a community, is already taking on lots of issues. You know, it's already taking on, you know, obviously separation of church and state, which, as, you know, Beth points out, it's a fairly obvious conclusion from becoming an atheist, but, you know, it's not inherent. And so there's sort of this idea that atheism plus, just a quick explanation for people who aren't familiar with it, atheism plus is this brand new name for something that's kind of been burbling up among many people in the atheist community and the atheist movement for some time now, which is that some people in the atheist movement want to explicitly take on social justice issues as they intersect with atheism. And to some extent that means just taking on social justice issues internally and making sure that our own communities and our own organizations are inclusive of women, inclusive of, you know, African Americans, inclusive of Latin Americans, inclusive of people with disabilities, inclusive of working class people and other marginalized people. And you know, just making sure that our own houses are more or less in order. And then also there's a question of, do we want to take these issues on in some public ways in areas where they intersect with atheism? So that's, you know, quick, you know, précis of what Atheism Plus is for people who don't know. And this is something that's been burbling up from the ground up for some time. And it's really just been in the last couple of weeks that it's been sort of given this name, which again kind of burbled up from the ground up. I forgot what I was going to say about that. Okay, so I think the main thing I want to say is we already take on, as you said, issues that are not obviously inherent to atheism. So, you know, we can take on others and it's still not mission drift. Another thing I would say is if you don't want to participate, that's fine. You know, if you want to participate in the traditional atheist forms of activism, that is awesome. That's fine. You know, nobody is saying you have to do this. If you're giving active hostile pushback, you know, basically what I say is, nobody is saying if you're not with us, you're against us. What we're saying is if you're against us, you're against us, which is kind of tautologically true. But the other thing I want to say that I think may be a little bit more controversial is, so people are saying, oh, this is divisive. You know, it's like you want to form your own thing and you want to split off and become a splinter group. And I think the point I want to make is this community is already divided. You know, there have already been divisions in this community, in this movement for some time now, especially over the issues of sexism and misogyny, but over other issues as well that have to do with social justice. We're already divided, and a lot of women in this movement have felt like we are being cut out. We're being cut out by overt misogyny within the movement and really hateful, ugly stuff. You know, I get rape threats. And I don't even want to tell you some of the details of the rape threats I get. They're very nasty. If you go to my blog and search for the hashtag men call me things, you'll see some of them. A lot of women in this movement already feel like we are being pushed out. And so there's the overt misogyny, and then there's also, that's a small minority, but there's also a much larger percentage of the movement that's kind of defending these people or rationalizing it or saying it's not very important, trivializing it, saying, oh, well, yeah, that's too bad, but what are you going to do? That's the internet, as if sort of, you know, as if there's nothing you can do about jerks on the internet. And so to say, oh, this is divisive, it's like this community is already divided. And I feel like to some extent, you know, we need to say what our priorities are. Are our priorities including women, or are priorities including misogynist creeps who issue rape threats on the internet? And you know, the fact that some of us are saying we want to do our own thing, we want to have our own space. And that's essentially what Atheism Plus is right now. Atheism Plus, to the degree that it's a tangible thing, is a forum. There's a forum online where people can discuss these issues and make plans for actions, and where people with kind of basic 101 level questions can ask them and have them answered in a civil way. And you know, that's what it is it's a group of people with shared interests and values who want to get together and talk and plan actions. When has that ever been seen as divisive in our community? You know, if somebody says it's like, you know, we're an atheist group and we want to go work on, you know, we want to make an atheist soup kitchen. You know, who says that's mission drift? Soup doesn't have anything to do with atheism. Feeding the homeless doesn't have anything to do with atheism. And so that, I'm repeating myself here, so I'll stop. But to say that it's divisive is ignoring the fact that there are already divisions in this community. And, you know, what we're trying to do is find a home and a place, create a safe space for people who have really been pushed out.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, well, like, there's a couple points I've been kind of taking notes here, so let me back up a little bit. Part of my degree is in communication, and the basic communication model consists of 3 parts. You have a sender, you have a message, you have a receiver. When somebody sends a message, there's an assumed receiver that is supposed to receive that message. Nobody just talks to nothing. I mean, you may speak to yourself. That's called intrapersonal communication. And that is considered just being yourself as the receiver. It's not that you're speaking to no one, you're speaking to yourself. So when someone says, I am an atheist, the question to me from a communication standpoint is, why are you communicating this? What are you trying to say? If you just want to tell me you're an atheist, okay. But is there some point to that beyond just saying I am an atheist? Is there something that you're trying to achieve by letting me know this? And I don't think I've ever met anybody who simply wears that label for no reason. Most people who are not interested in some sort of a goal in being openly out and self-affiliated as atheists have a reason for doing so. I know a lot of people who have talked about this who say, I don't really see any reason to call myself an atheist, or I don't see, and those people really don't think they have a reason. They don't run around telling people I'm an atheist or wearing an A pin or you know, supporting the Out campaign because they don't see a reason to do that. But if a person does see a reason to do that, if you're wearing that label and you're wearing that label loud and proud, you have a reason. that's beyond just saying, I'm an atheist. And it's interesting to me because a lot of the people who are complaining about A+ seem to be loud, proud atheists. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, you're a loud, proud atheist. Why? Why? What is your point? Even if you're arguing with Christians, okay, well then you're atheist plus anti-theist. There is some point to being a self-labeled atheist. And also, when Greta was talking about the soup kitchen, the Atheist Community of Austin has a number of community service activities. We have a couple of street cleanups, we have a blood drive. I have never once heard anybody say, what is up with those people in the group doing the blood drive? Why are they trying to make a schism? What are they trying to achieve by going out and donating blood? What does that have to do with atheism? And why are they being so divisive? That conversation never happened because it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous conversation. Nobody in ACA, when you sign ACA, they have a little mission statement. You have to sign a little statement about what you're willing to acknowledge as an atheist. And nobody is required to sign on for the blood drive. It's just something that some people do, and they have a regular schedule, and it goes on the ACA calendar, and ACA does support it, but nobody's required to do it, and nobody complains that it's a problem because it's not an atheist function, and it's, dividing the community because some people are doing it and some people aren't. And nobody makes that assumption. I was on the blood drive for a while. I haven't done it in a little bit. I need to get back onto it. But when I did it, I didn't sit around thinking, screw those atheists who aren't doing this. What is wrong with them? Why aren't they donating? Why do they hate people and want people to die? That never went through my head. I went down to the blood bank and I was, kept my little gallons record or whatever and felt real good about what I was doing. And that was as far as that went in my head. And the other point that I had written down had to do with it already being splintered. Despite what I'm saying about how you can have people that are involved in what's basically a SIG and not have a problem with it, multiple SIGs exist in many groups, and someone brought that up earlier today, and it's extremely correct. There's not a problem with having SIGs within a group. But there does become an issue when part of the group dismisses, does not acknowledge, does not value another part of the group and makes that very clear. And I would say that it's interesting. Nobody likes to talk about the elevator gate. But prior to the incident with Rebecca Watson, I probably, if someone would have asked me, was there any issues with sexism in the community, I would have said no. I've never seen it. I don't think I've ever had a problem with it. I've never encountered it. I've met some sexists in the groups, but you're going to find sexists every now and then everywhere, and whatever. Some people are just a little weird. But then I saw Rebecca's video about the elevator thing, and I still thought, you're going to every now and then just get somebody that's a little weird. It's not a reflection of the community. It's one guy in an elevator late at night. Maybe he's had a few drinks. I don't know. But whatever. This is one weird guy that got a little bit out of line one night. And that's not a reflection on men in this community. It's not a reflection on the community's attitude. Didn't change my mind 1 ounce. Then I saw the reaction to her video. And then I said, wow, Tracie, you are wrong. You are completely wrong. You have completely misjudged this entire thing. And there's a huge problem here. Luckily, I hope I'm right, I get the impression that the majority of people in this community are actually pretty egalitarian and open-minded and respect equality, notwithstanding the unconscious prejudices that were talked about earlier today, of which I am sure I'm guilty of holding some. But when I'm called out on it, I hope I do listen. And I hope I do pay attention when somebody that is in a minority group or somebody is in a group that is, has a tradition of prejudice against them starts to tell me this is a problem. I'm going to listen. I had something like that happen on Facebook. This was like a while back. There was a crime that occurred that was very popular. There was some debate about whether or not it was racially motivated. I couldn't really tell. I kind of leaned toward probably wasn't racially motivated, but I can see why it's really charged. And I was posting a little bit about it as it came up in the news because my Facebook page is devoted to personal stuff, so it's not just atheism, it's anything that interests me or anything that I think is socially relevant. And
there was a guy on my page who was black, and he started to post, this is racist, and he's going on about the racial aspects of it. And I thought, yeah, I'm not sure, but I didn't say anything. And I didn't say anything not because I didn't want to speak up. I didn't say anything because I wanted to listen. I wanted to know, what does this guy have to say? Here's somebody who's in a community that has suffered a lot of social prejudice and bigotry, and he's telling me that he's reading into this racial prejudice that I'm not necessarily seeing, but I need to respect that it's possible that he sees something I don't see, that I am like that callous, that I have not lived where he has lived, that maybe I really am blind to some things. And so I simply let that discussion happen, and I did not involve myself, and I paid attention. That was all I did, and I didn't chime in. And I'm still not sure whether what happened was racially motivated or not. But I just didn't see it was my place to shut him down. I felt like it was my place to just let the guy have his say and let the list talk, and let's see what happens. And I don't understand the defensive reaction that people have to immediately wanting to say. I mean, I can understand not wanting to be racist, but I can't understand the idea of thinking that just because I don't think I'm racist doesn't mean that I'm somehow, it means that, how would I think I'm immune to that kind of social indoctrination, especially after being a theist for so many years?
Right, and I mean, that guy could still have been wrong about that being racially motivated, but you at least listened to his perspective and looked at it and didn't flat out come out and tell him, no, that was absolutely not racist, because you didn't know.
So there's one thing, what you just said, there's one thing I want to respond to, which is it has to do with I don't want to say, gee, I don't understand how anybody could, react defensively this way, because I've reacted defensively. I've certainly had somebody tell me that something I said was insensitive, and had that sort of defensive, emotional flush of, you're telling me I'm a bad person, and I know I'm not a bad person, so I'm going to stick my fingers in my ears and say, I can't hear you, I can't hear you, I can't hear you. I'm not going to say I don't understand that, I don't have sympathy with that. What I do think is that, I don't know, that as atheists and especially as skeptics, we need to understand that we have cognitive biases. That's one of the things. And we need to understand that unconscious bias against people that we've, in ways that we've learned from childhood, is going to be part of that. And there's something that I think is really important to remember about all sort of, again, all these, conflicts and disagreements and controversies in our community, is that a lot of education is happening. I mean, I realize I'm an eternal optimist, and everybody's going, oh God, here's Greta being the eternal optimist again. But I think that that's something that's really important to remember. I mean, yes, I get the horrible misogynistic trolling, and then I get the sort of, what in some ways is more upsetting, which is the reflexive defensiveness of the horrible misogynistic trolling and the people trivializing and saying, oh, it's not important. I also get just so many emails and so many comments from men who are saying, my eyes have been opened in the last year, saying, I had no idea. I did not understand what it was that women in this world go through until we started having this conversation. And, so, yes, there's been, divisiveness and there's been conflict, but there's also been just a tremendous amount of consciousness raising. And I think, if we're looking in terms of the future of the movement, one of the things that I've noticed is when I talk about these issues, when I talk about, sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, classism, ableism, and so on, in student groups, they're on board. They need very little of the why this is important, why we should even be talking about this education. They pretty much just want to talk about how. And that's not universally true, but it's largely true. So if we want to look at the future of this movement, students and young people already really care about this stuff. And if we don't care about it, they're going to be put off. If we don't take on these issues, if we don't make ourselves more diverse and more welcoming, to a wider spectrum of people than we're already doing, the student movement is not going to get on board. And, and the degree to which the student movement's already taking these issues on is, to me, very encouraging. So I think that's just the main thing I want to say there is there has actually been a tremendous amount of education going on. And I think, again, when we look at history, it's like, again, you look at the early feminist movement who was sticking their fingers in their ears and going, oh my God, lesbians, no, 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 no. And they were saying a lot of the same kinds of things that we're seeing now. They're saying, we're already trying to get acceptance of just feminists. If we take on lesbianism, then that's going to alienate people even further. We're already stigmatized as women and as feminists. If we add this, if we can't take on these other people, other people's, issues too. And in fact, the feminist movement became stronger for taking on LGBT issues as their own issues, which they were.
Yeah, the comment was that the taking on LGBT issues would be additional baggage. Yeah. And this is exactly what we're hearing right now with the people that are so opposed to atheism plus. Oh, we don't need this extra baggage. Mm-hmm. So, and this idea that it's a clique. And I want to emphasize something. It's opt-in. The label is opt-in. What you do about it is opt-in. Nobody's forcing you. And like PZ said, we're not lining somebody up against the wall and shooting off all the people that don't adopt atheism plus. So if your atheism is just the dictionary atheism, okay.
Well, and there's something we probably at some point want to open this up to questions, but there's something I wanted to riff on what you said, which is, when people say, oh, this is mission drift, or we can't take on this extra baggage, women are not baggage. African Americans are not baggage. People of Asian descent, people of Hispanic descent, indigenous people, trans people, lesbian and gay people, working class people, poor people, they are not baggage. They are atheists. Or they're questioning, and they might want to be atheists, or they might be considering atheism. They're not baggage, they are us. And, we can't, there's something I say a lot, which is that people have this tendency to say, oh, we have to be a one-size-fits-all movement. We can't, schism ourselves out. When you say that we have to be a one-size-fits-all movement, what you're saying is this has to be a movement that is the size that it already is, which is the size that comfortably fits the people who are already in it. And if we're going to seriously grow as a movement, we need to make ourselves more comfortable to a wider variety of people. And sometimes that means making things a little bit less comfortable for the people who have been traditionally in it. But I think we all know it's like if you were once religious and you became an atheist, you probably went through an uncomfortable period where you had to learn, gee, everything I know is wrong and I have to rethink. But you're not sorry about that. You now think, wow, I grew and my world is larger now. And I think that that's something that we will see as atheists as we welcome a wider spectrum of people into the community. It's going to make us grow, and that's uncomfortable, but it's also awesome.
Yeah, and, I get asked a lot at ACA functions and just talking to different people. At what point do you think atheism or, atheists as a whole will be politically relevant? Because right now, we're not really politically relevant. It's too easy to listen to the religious lobbyists, and, we've got our one small lobbying group in Washington. And so my view on this is that we're almost there, okay? I think that once you get to about 20% of the general population that identifies as a non-believer of some flavor, then you become politically relevant. And I'm not talking about people that identify only to their friends on the internet, but people who are willing to stand up and say, I'm an atheist, I vote, these are the issues I care about. When you can do that, when you get 20% of the people out there doing that, then you're politically relevant. Then they can no longer ignore us. We can't get to that point if we ignore our allies and call them baggage. Yeah.
All right, well, I think we might want to open it up to questions now.
Hi. One of the most common criticisms of atheists, particularly the new atheists, is that we are not listening and not judging when the religious speak. That by trying to argue against religion, we are being intolerant. Do you think that maybe part of the reason so many atheists are very uncomfortable with the idea of, listening to women speaking, listening to the voices of, charges of racism, et cetera, is because they're hearing echoes of this just listen, don't judge, just tolerate, etc. Is there a tension between atheism, which argues against religion, and the people in Atheism Plus?
I think so. I think people, they've gotten on this bandwagon, we're confrontational, we're hardcore, and, that's all great. And you don't need to respect religious ideas, but you need to respect religious people. And you need to respect women, and you need to listen. And if there are feminists out there that are spouting, bullshit, then yes, call them on it, and don't be afraid just because, they're feminist. But if you're not sure that it's bullshit and you don't have evidence to say that it's bullshit, then you don't need to be saying it's bullshit.
Are you saying atheists are argumentative reflexively? You're wrong, and let me give you reasons why you're wrong. 1A. No, I think that's actually a good point, and I think that there is some truth to that. That we're a contentious bunch, and we're used to. We're used to debate, we're used to, confrontation and so on, many of us anyway. I think that there's something similar that's kind of related to that, which is that as atheists, we're marginalized. And so we're used to coming at these, I'm sorry, I'm thinking this out loud, so I may not say it really coherently. As atheists, we're marginalized, and marginalized people tend to be more familiar with the privileged group than privileged group is with the marginalized people. And so, for instance, atheists are a lot more familiar with religion than religious believers are with atheists. So we're used to being the ones we're really familiar, we have thought about this really carefully, we've really gone through the arguments, we can shoot down Pascal's wager with our eyes closed, one arm tied behind our back, and 6 beers in us. And so therefore, when somebody else challenges us on, something where we're on the privileged side, we're kind of used to already thinking of ourselves as right. We're the thoughtful ones, we're the skeptical ones, we're the ones who really thought this stuff through. And so I think that there's a tendency to just sort of reflexively think, oh, I'm so right and I'm so smart and I'm so thoughtful, and so I'm just going to reflexively shoot those arguments down, rather than realizing that, yes, okay, most of us have some areas where we're privileged and some areas where we're marginalized. I'm, for instance, I'm an atheist, I'm a woman, I'm bisexual, there's other areas where I'm marginalized, and I'm white, I'm pretty comfortably middle class, I'm college educated, I'm American, so there's areas where I'm privileged. And I think that there's this tendency to just kind of reflexively think of ourselves as being the beleaguered ones, and of not thinking in terms of, well, actually, maybe the same way that, oh my God, I've heard Pascal's wager 800,000 times, I'm so sick of it. Maybe, for instance, an African American is really tired of hearing, I don't see color. And if they're getting really irritated with you because you said, I don't see color, maybe you should shut up and listen.
Hi, pardon my ignorance, but this whole A+ is new to me. I wanted to know what is the difference between A+ and secular humanism, and if there's not a difference, why would you choose to adopt a new label? Because, again, brand new to me.
Can I talk about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a difference. The difference is that you have to be an atheist to be an A+. And that's a big difference. On the way here, the person who gave me a ride from the airport is a humanist. He's in a humanist group. And I asked him, what is the ratio of atheists to theists in your group? And he's like, well, most of our group's agnostic. Okay, well, if you watch TAE, that's not an answer. He didn't answer my question. The question was, what is the ratio of atheists to theists in your group? Well, they mostly label as agnostic. Okay, well, that doesn't answer my question, because they are either atheist or they are theist. And I want to know, what is the ratio of atheists to theists in that group? They don't know. But what they did tell me was they did have, I said, well, how many people then, let me make it easy, how many people in the group are self-declared theists? Well, we had one theist that came, and then they found out there was an atheist in the group, and they never came back. That's why we have to have an atheist group exclusively that does this, because we are vilified. People don't like us. People think we're horrible people. The little drawing of that this is what a non-believer looks like. I don't know if you were in that session, but I think it was that Hemet?
Hemet, yeah.
Yeah, that showed the little pictures that the Sunday school children drew, and it was, this is what a Christian looks like, this is what a non-Christian looks like, and the non-Christian was just everything vile you could probably ever dream of. And because the issue that I have personally is that when I walk into I looked up secular humanism just to kind of get a real good, clear definition of what they're calling it. And some of the definitions are like, we don't put stock in supernatural explanations. Well, when I was a Christian, I wouldn't have called my God supernatural. Supernatural was the crazy stuff that people believe. That was freaking telekinesis, and, it wasn't. Astrology and, all that weirdness. My God wasn't supernatural. That's ghosts and crazy, right? And it was maybe like 2 days later, I watched Justin Vakola do a debate with a Methodist minister, and when he called her out on supernatural beliefs, she said, my God is not supernatural. My God created nature. My God is natural. He's part of nature, and we see him in nature and operates through nature, and this is what they think. They don't see themselves as excluded from that group because of a supernatural term not being accepted. And they had other things like making decisions based on, non-religious, not on religious dogma. Well, there's plenty of people that are Christian who don't believe that we should be, making decisions just based on religious dogma, or that, and so it's like, well, why would I have a problem with those people? Well, I have a problem with those people because it's very hard for me to sit down at a table and I'm looking at the goal of trying to figure out what's best for humanity and what's best for the globe and what's best for the world and what are we going to do, for the human species, when I know that a person sitting at that table has the view that every human being ever born deserves to be executed, and that every human being ever born deserves to be tortured for eternity. I have no faith that this person can really work with me any more than I have faith that they could work with me to work out the issues of racism if they're a member of the Klan. Now, again, this is me personally. This is why I would have an issue if you're not willing to hang that tile on the door that says that you're not going to accept somebody into this group who has an underlying freaking anti-humanist view. And I don't know how much more anti-human and dehumanizing you can get than saying it should have been you hanging on that cross. And this is not crazy right-wing fundamentalist Christian dogma. This is every New Testament church's orthodox view, except for perhaps Jehovah's Witnesses. This is what you believe as a Christian. They don't say it like that, but if you ask them about it, that's what they believe. Jesus died for your sins in your stead, and you should have been the one on that cross, but he took it for you. And I don't believe that about people. I don't believe that everyone deserves to die or that everybody deserves to be executed. And I don't feel comfortable trying to figure out the best for a human being with somebody who does think that, even if they're keeping it at a level where they're not consciously aware of what the hell they're saying.
I actually want to speak to that very briefly, which is there's been a lot of conversation. In fact, online, I have a piece on my own blog called Secular Humanism. Secular humanism is awesome, but it's not the same as atheism plus. And a lot of other people have written about this. And here's what I think. I think that there is certainly a tremendous amount of overlap. The Venn diagram between atheism plus and secular humanism, there's a lot of overlap. But they're not identical. And there's a lot of reasons why they're not identical, but I'm just going to focus on one, which is names matter and labels matter. And different kinds of people have found themselves drawn to the humanist movement and the humanist communities versus the atheist communities. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. And again, there's crossover and there's back and forth and there's people who identify as both. But humanism has tended, on the whole, on average, to draw people who are more diplomatic, more interested in community building, more willing to do interfaith work with religious groups that have similar goals, progressive religious groups and so on. The name atheism and groups that have called themselves atheist have tended to draw people who are more confrontational, more actively anti-theistic, more in your face, more actively trying to persuade people out of religion. And even if the Venn diagrams of what our actual, goals and mission statements were, even if those were 100% identical, which I think they're not, the associations people have with those names are very different. And people get to call themselves what they want. There's a lot of people who have been really galvanized and really driven to action by the word atheism and by the atheist movement in a way that they just haven't been by humanism. And the opposite of that is true. Atheism puts some people off that humanism really embraces. So what I would say is, if you are personally more drawn to secular humanism, awesome. 100% in support of you. You should absolutely do that. I hope we will be able to work together. I think we will be able to work together. But they're not identical. Atheism Plus tends to to draw people who are more in the in-your-face, screw religion, confrontational atheist movement, and who then want to add on to that, plus we care about social justice.
So I have a quick question for you guys. I absolutely love the Atheism Plus concept and everything. I think this is new to me, but I'm very excited about it. But the question I have is in regards to the religious community, because what I'm doing with Free Thought Exchange is I'm going into the churches and I'm addressing the religious community. And I've noticed that what we have done as atheists is we've reacted to their stereotype. So they think, okay, so you're an atheist. That means that you believe in this and this and this and this and this and this and this. They give us plus, 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 right? And so we're saying, no. Atheism just means we don't have a belief in God. And so we've put this forward as like atheism doesn't mean all those things. And so now I'd be curious to hear your response. Like now, we're going in and we're saying, because I go into the churches and I say atheism doesn't talk about what we believe in. It just says what we don't believe in, right? But I love this concept of Atheism Plus. Is there any way should I bring that up to the religious community, or it's already been stereotyped?
Well, you're right. Atheism is just like a belief in God, and I think you really do need to make that clear to the religious people you're talking to. If they meet an atheist, they don't necessarily know anything else about that person. They don't know that they hate God or that they had a bad experience or any of that. But I think you should bring up secular humanism and Atheism Plus as these are these extra things that some atheists are into, and these are some of their positions, and they do a lot of social justice that the people in the churches might also do. But I think you do need to keep it to atheism is just like a belief, because they might meet atheists who are not into any of that.
Yeah, and I would add to that, if I tell you that I'm an atheist, we all understand that tells you nothing else about me other than I don't believe in a God. Okay? If somebody tells you they're a Christian, what do you know about them? You don't really know very much. And so the only way to find out is to ask, what does that mean to you? Okay? And, atheism still means don't believe in a God, okay? The plus part of it, that's where, and this is another conversation Tracie and I had over lunch. I have this idea of what kind of world I want to live in. And that involves addressing things like poverty and racism and sexism and transphobia and homophobia and things like that, okay? My atheism informs how I'm going to achieve those goals, because unlike a theist, I know there's no supernatural entity who's going to swoop down and help me achieve those goals. If I'm going to achieve those goals, it has to be me and people like me getting off our asses and going out and doing the work, okay? So that's how my atheism informs, my beliefs and how I'm going to achieve those goals that I've set for myself. So.
I would add to that very quickly. There's sort of been this meme going around, this trope going around that Atheism Plus is trying to rebrand atheism like for everybody. We're really not trying to rebrand atheism for everybody. What we're doing is trying to carve out a subset of it. It's almost like an atheist knitting group. I mean, obviously it's a little, subtly different from that in lots of ways, but, so I think that what you can say to these people, or to anybody who's saying, but you're somehow trying to tie in social justice with atheism in this inherently tied-in way. It's like, no. Atheism still just means you don't believe in God. There are many atheists who also think this, so that's the atheism plus subset of atheism. That being said, there's a lot of atheists for whom these issues aren't separate. I mean, for one thing, there's a lot of people who the reason they left religion or the reason they started questioning religion was they saw religion having really screwed up ideas about women. They saw religion as having really screwed up ideas about gay people. They saw religion as having really screwed up ideas about African Americans. They saw it as having really screwed up ideas about poor people. And for a lot of people, the whole reason why they left religion was these issues, and so therefore it's a little disingenuous for atheists to say, oh, well, those issues are just totally irrelevant. For a lot of people, they're not. And then the flip side of that is for a lot of us, once we accept there is no God, there is no afterlife, this life is all we have, that conclusion doesn't stand in a vacuum. It has implications. And for many of us, one of those implications is, therefore, we really have to make this life matter, for ourselves and for other people, because other people matter too. So it's not just sort of like, oh, well, there's this atheism thing and there's this knitting thing, and so we're happen to be putting those two together. For many of us, those two issues are very closely tied. But not for everybody, and I think it's okay to say atheism just means disbelief in God, but for many of us, our atheism means these positive values, and I don't think we should be afraid of that. I think we can celebrate that.
I think there's good statistical evidence that the majority of atheists are very much in favor of the social justice issues. I've been an activist atheist for over 30 years. I've discussed these issues with literally thousands of atheists. And I think I can say with some authority that while there is discussion within the community that maybe we shouldn't take on extra baggage, the major single reason atheists or as atheist groups have stayed out of social justice issues is the idea that we would then be a kiss of death to that movement. And we have probably a plurality of atheists actively involved in social justice movements, but they hide their atheism in that time. What do we do to change that attitude?
Yeah, actually, one of the early criticisms of the women's movement in this country was that it was too atheist, because there were an awful lot of atheists in the early feminist movement. And yeah, it was one of those things that some people sort of tamped it down and said, okay, we're gonna be more welcoming to religious people. And actually, for that stage of where the women's movement was, that was the right decision, because let's face it, religion is terrible for women. And so a lot of women were coming into the women's movement who really needed the help of, the sisterhood, as it were, to get out of really abusive situations or just economically depressing situations. There were lots of things to do. So I think we're at the point now where, it's not the kiss of death to say you're an atheist. And in fact, Gloria Steinem just won Humanist of the Year. And for those who don't know, she is an atheist. She describes herself as spiritual, which I disagree with, but, that's okay. She's mostly right. So, I think now it's not the kiss of death for these activist movements, and I think we do need to be open about it, because it's just like being gay or lesbian in some kind of social justice movement. We've reached a point now where identifying yourself as gay or lesbian is not, that does not taint the movement, okay? It's okay. And we need to be open and out, as long as you feel safe doing that. I don't advocate people jeopardizing their safety, just for the movement.
And if there are movements who really make it clear that we're not welcome if we're out atheists, we can make alternatives. The American Cancer Society didn't want atheist teams, so we moved to, leukemia and lymphoma and, other cancer charities.
Yeah, and something I would say to that is, if you're asking, what can we do about, the stigma, it's like if there are other movements or organizations, whatever, that feel like they would be tainted by us. Well, some of what we can do is continue to do what we've been doing, which is decrease the stigma against us and make ourselves into a political powerhouse, and make ourselves more visible as a political powerhouse. I mean, there is this whole thing that we keep talking about, which is that atheists own the internet, and atheists can also be this, tremendous fundraising machine. Our ability, it's like we raised like $100,000 for the Secular Student Alliance in like a month. We raised $60,000 for Jessica Alquist's, scholarship fund. We can be, when we get motivated, when we're inspired, we can be a tremendous powerhouse. And we need to make that clear to other social change movements that we are a strong ally. And so I think that that's something we can do. And also I think something we can do is to be a good ally, is to, to show up go to your local LGBT organization and say, what can we do to help? Go to your local, poverty fighting organization and say, what can we do to help? So I think that that's a lot of what we can do, is just continue to combat the stigma and continue to make ourselves into a political powerhouse.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, it doesn't really answer your question or help, but it's just an observation based on what I was talking about before about Christian orthodoxy. I continue to be blown away by the fact that we can lose a PR battle against a group who has like a tradition of oppressing gays, oppressing women, supporting racism and slavery. I mean, this is a group that has been on the side of wrong on every issue historically forever. And yet, because there's some good people that go into that church, somehow, if you knock it, you're vilified. And one time, I guess I compared it to calling out the KKK and having somebody say, well, but some people just go because they like the picnics. Okay, then I guess it's fine. And I can't see somebody looking at me and saying, you're an evil person because you're slamming the KKK, but there's some good people in that group who aren't really, all that racist, and they're not that bad. They don't support like the whole agenda. And I'm sorry, you joined a group that has a very famous mission statement. They've got orthodoxy and a history of developing that orthodoxy. You made a freaking book to talk about what you believe. And in that book, it's horrendous, awful, hideous stuff. And your Messiah gets up and says, no, all that hideous crap in the Old Testament, it's perfect. It's totally perfect. The only flaw in it is that you human beings are just not able to live up to the perfectness of that law. The law that says let a raped woman, marry her rapist or be killed with him. The law that says here's how badly you can beat a slave. As long as he doesn't die, you're cool. These are the people who get if you don't raise your kids in it, you're a bad person. If you don't believe it, there's something wrong. How can you be moral and not be involved in this? And it's like, I don't know how you could be moral and be involved in it. I mean, I see moral people involved in it, but I don't know how they came out of that. Right? I mean, because it's crazy. It's crazy world that gets the gold star, and saying, I think it's wrong, gets you labeled as just vile. I can't understand that. And I do think that, maybe as a way to boost PR, we need to make it more clear what's being taught in these churches.
Yeah. And also, I just want to speak to that briefly because I agree with everything you said except the part about them getting a gold star, because I think the tarnish on that gold star is starting to fade, especially when you talk to young people. Christians are actually kind of freaking out about this. There was this big study that was asked, of Christians, how do you see Christianity? And a lot of it, this is among people who believe it, a lot of them saw it as in many ways very negative. And it said things like, I see Christianity as being anti-gay. I see Christianity as being intolerant of people who are different. And especially I think on the anti-gay issue, young people in this country are overwhelmingly pro-gay. And Christianity is losing those people to a great extent because they see Christianity as being homophobic, which, much of the time it is. Not universally, but much of the time it is. And so that's actually another reason, a positive reason why we should take on social change issues. Because if we can be seen as, hey, yeah, those are the Christian, can I curse? Those are the Christian assholes who are saying that your Those are the Christian assholes who are saying that your gay friends are going to burn in hell because they love each other. We are the awesome non-believers who think this life is all there that we have and that people should love each other.
I also wanted to just briefly address the question that was brought up over here. I also work on another program called the Atheist Experience, and on that show we often get callers who ask, as atheists, what do you believe about fill in the blank? And it's tough because the show is put out to spread information about atheism, and yet, like you're saying, what the hell information is there about atheism? I don't believe a God exists. End of show, right? But in reality, when they call up and they say, what do you believe about something, we always caveat it, or we try to. I mean, I'm not going to say that you could never find a clip where we didn't, but very frequently we answer the person and we say, well, first of all, there is no atheist belief on this. But many atheists accept Big Bang. Many atheists accept, evolutionary theory. There's no requirement for an atheist to accept any of that. And I think this is kind of the same thing. That's why, one of the reasons I immediately, when I saw A+ and started to read just a little bit about it, I was like, wow, this is just bingo, what I've been looking for. And what I like about it is that it puts a big plus. There's an A and there's a plus. And so for you, it's very easy to say, there's the A, and then there's all this crap added onto it. Good crap, but, and so you've got the atheism, and it's not saying atheism now has to be this. It's saying I recognize as an atheist that I'm adding stuff here that isn't here. And I think it's okay. I mean, I have reasons why I get from here to here, and it's not a requirement to get from there to there. But I think the plus is really what, for me, made me say, okay, this is not about redefining atheism, because I would have backlashed to that myself.
All right, we're going to do 2 more questions, and then we're already over time a little bit, but we'll do these last 2.
Hi, I tried to dream up a good question for you, so hopefully you'll like this. As an argument against the religious mantra of one man, one woman, I'd like to propose that we give more thought to all aspects of sexuality and atheism. I've recently read The Ethical Slut and Sex at Dawn, and both question that the standard model of virginity until marriage and then lifelong monogamy, that it questions whether those are either natural or normal. Do you think a discussion of not only LGBT inclusion, but, quote, normal heterosexuality belongs in our dialogue? And if so, how do we approach it?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I have a bit of a background also in anthropology, and definitely the idea, I mean, pair bonding is common, and you find it like all over the place, but you also find variations on that. There are other species that we would very sloppily label mate for life, and when you go and test the offspring, it's not always the pair bond male that fathered that offspring. And it's the same, I mean, you have to think even the ones that did father it, that doesn't mean that that was a faithful little committed wolf or, or swan or whatever. And so I do think that it's one thing, it's a sticky wicket. You have the idea of the state sanctioning a union here. And I get the pragmatic use of that. It's almost like when you adopt a child, that it's like the state recognizing that this is like not a blood relative, but you're taking this person on legally, and they then are, they get these automatic familial association and benefits that the state recognizes. The person, for example, that you marry has automatic access to you if you're comatose after an accident, whereas usually it would just be your close blood relatives that would be allowed in that room. I get the idea of saying, I'm picking this person out to be like family here, and I want the state to give them all the benefits and rights of family. I mean, there's a real pragmatic reason why that's a good idea. But all the different variants of what could happen in bonding can't be really pragmatically included in that, or else you just have wild, lots and lots of requirements of the state. I don't think there's a way to do an umbrella thing that would include all kinds, like the issues that polygamy would bring into it. It's not that I have no problem. I don't think anybody should ever go to prison for polygamous unions. No way. But at the same time, if you're asking the state to file that and make a legal representation of that, it's going to be very tough when you've got kids from different people and property purchased with these two but not with those two, and yet they're all family in this unit that is all spousal. And how do you model that, right, from a state perspective, just trying to make it easy? The state's just trying to make it easy. That's what it should be doing anyway, is making a pragmatic union here. But so to me, what the state sanctions isn't necessarily and should not be considered representative of what is normal. It's simply a pragmatic law concern. And that's why I really, really don't agree with this idea of it being like a religious thing. I think religion absconded bonding, which had happened in more than just human societies, since there have been sexual unions possible. Religion didn't make this up. People pair bond. And they also bond outside those pair bonds, but there's a good pragmatic reason to have a good right arm that you picked personally and that is, kind of there for you. It's just a good practical thing to have. But when it comes to the gay marriage and stuff, obviously our model of two people, there's no reason to deny that. Even from a pragmatic standpoint, it fits right in. You just put one spouse's name here, one spouse's name there. It's the same document that I signed when I got married. I don't see that they'd have to change a thing. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the idea of looking at that as a normal state or as like a state that's like a requirement, or saying that something outside of that is somehow should be looked at as abnormal because the state's not sanctioning it, I agree. That wouldn't be correct.
I actually want to speak to that briefly, more than just to say, yes, which is, first of all, I don't actually give a damn about what's normal sexually. I care about, and I give an entire talk on atheism and sexuality if you're ever interested in, I think it's on YouTube somewhere if you Google Greta Christina, atheism and sexuality. But sort of what it boils down to is this. When you let go of religious laws about sex, when you let go of this idea that God really gives a damn who you're fucking and how, when you let go of religious taboos, sort of this God's checklist of what you are and aren't allowed to do, what you're looking at is basing your sexual ethics on ethics, on fundamental ethical principles, on questions like consent, on questions like honesty, on questions like, is there any harm being done, on questions like, does this help society run smoothly, or does it does it make things chaotic? Consent and honesty and fairness and harm are sort of these core ethical values having to do with sexuality. And so, therefore, when you're asking questions about things like polyamory, non-monogamy, open relationships, multiple relationships, and so on, those are the questions that we have to look at. And I don't actually care sexually what's normal. What I care about is it consenting? Is it fair? Is everybody, who's involved in it capable of consenting? Or are they, being subjected to undue pressure? Is anybody being hurt? Are people, if there is potential for harm, is everybody capable of consenting to that level of risk? And so on. And so those are, I think, the kinds of questions that we should be asking as atheists about sexuality. So absolutely, I think that, and especially because sexuality is absolutely one of the areas that religion has just caused huge amount of damage. I don't know if everybody's read Daryl Ray's Secularism and Sexuality study, but it's overwhelmingly, the evidence is that when people leave religion, their sex lives get better. And interestingly, their sex lives don't change that much. The things they're actually doing aren't radically different. It's just that they let go of a lot of pointless guilt about it. So yes, we should take on that issue.
Yeah, and I had one comment about the whole idea of pair bonding and marriage and the rules surrounding that. I always introduce my wife as my wife these days. We are not legally married in any jurisdiction in which marriage equality exists. However, we live in Texas, which is a common law state. Okay? And in a common law state, which is kind of weird, there's only like 7 common law states left. But in a common law state, the only thing you have to do in order to be considered married is hold yourselves out as a married couple, okay? There's no time requirement or anything like that. You just have to introduce yourselves as married. If we were a heterosexual couple, under the law, we would be married, okay? So we've been together 12 years. We have a child together. I legally adopted him in Texas as an out atheist and lesbian. And a judge in Texas said, yep, this is a great home for him. Happy to do this. So he is legally my child. And the state refuses to recognize our relationship. So, but that's religious privilege again.
I have a question, and I know we have to hustle out of here, so I'm going to make it quick. Before I realized I was an atheist, I was progressive before I even knew what that meant. And now as an atheist, I consider myself a progressive atheist. And I understand that the whole lot of the resistance or the opposition to atheism plus turns on definitions, failing to recognize the differences between atheist, meaning the answer to your question on the existence of a God, versus the social movement that is atheism plus. And maybe we don't have time to even answer this question perhaps in your blogs or in upcoming shows, but is there a significant difference for anyone that might be concerned about it between atheism plus and simply being a progressive atheist?
20-second answers, if at all possible.
I really don't give a damn what people call themselves. As if they are atheists and they're on board with social justice, then they're a friend of mine.
Yeah, I'm not too clear on the whole definition of progressivism either, so we'll have to talk about that, Arn.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Greta on this. I don't really care what you call yourself. If you're on board with social justice and you're an atheist, we can work together.
Give it up for the Godless Bitches.